So, good afternoon again, everyone. We are just a quarter of a minute early, which is nice. So, welcome. Uh, our heat wave continues, and we're having the longest hot spell we've had in England since 1976. And we were here in 1976, a long time ago. What is that, 50 years? And we had just acquired Homestead Manor, and it was one of those summers where everything got so dry, and sadly, a lot of beautiful rhododendrons died along the drive, the approach drive to Homestead Manor. So we we remember it very well. And now, like that, everything's brown, and yet we're enjoying a real summer. Not everybody enjoys a real summer. Tiago in the next room thrives when it's cold, still wears his flip-flops and shorts. So he doesn't like this, but I'm enjoying it. Anyway, down to the real thing. We were talking last week about fundraising and spiritual warfare, and I think this is going to go on for at least one more, probably two more, maybe three more sessions. We'll see. There's a lot to say about it. I realize that as I start talking about it, my reason for speaking on this subject is I've had some pretty persistent reservations about a kind of general direction that I sense in much of YWAM. I can't say all of YWAM, but much of YWAM. And I have this title which is designed to get your attention: spiritual warfare, fundraising. But I am actually genuinely concerned that our tendency is to drift towards us taking personal control of how funds are raised, and doing it through systems, doing it through methods, doing it through approaches that, they may be really nice. I'm not against any of these things. The reason why it's a bit difficult to talk about is that the issues are issues of the heart, not necessarily of how we are behaving. So it's not wrong to have and cultivate a wide range of friends, and to have those friends, to ask those friends if that's the right thing to do, to support you. I'm not condemning anything. I'm just saying that more we learn how to do these things, the more tempting it is to take control of it, and to make it about money, and to end up serving money. It's really insidious. It worms its way into our hearts. So I want to back up and reemphasize a little bit of what I said in the first session last week. That when the Lord says you cannot serve God and mammon, you can't serve two masters, well, that's setting up wealth or mammon or money, depending on who translates it, how it's translated, as the alternate to serving God, the big idol. And I think if you look at the history of religion and the history of human activities and human cultures, you'll find that money is always, wealth and power go together, and that they tend to be the great prize especially for ambitious people. And those are more often men than women, although some women excel at it. And because that is how Jesus set it up. He set it up, it's this or that. You got to serve God or mammon. You can't serve them both. Now, why did he say that out of all the idolatry? Well, I think we get some insight into that out of the latter half of Ezekiel, and especially in Ezekiel 27, and then 28 spells it out. You'll know from Paul's writings and 1 Corinthians and Colossians and so on, that he emphasizes that we are not battling against people or with people. we are battling against principalities and powers, and in a sense with them, that is the good princes, and there are some, the Michaels and the Gabriels and all the ones whose names we don't know, are our servants. And I can't unpack that much more, but that's what the scriptures say. So we are in a battle, and somehow, the way I see it is that our wills sit in the middle, and they are appealed to via emotion and via reason, via feelings and via truth, to go into alignment with one or the other. And if we go in alignment with the one, mammon, then that leads into all kinds of things. It can lead into the occult. It can lead into deep dishonesty and deception and fraud and all those kinds of things, lying to everybody, really disappointing people in order to get money. That was so illustrated to us a long time ago. The wealthiest man in the world at that time was a great oil magnate, and he lived only about 15 miles from where we lived in Sussex. He was over the border into Surrey. And we had a friend who was in the oil business. We had an acquaintance. He had made himself known to Lauren and was a friend to Lauren. He was a very godly man, and he wasn't serving money at all. In fact, he just obeyed the Lord, and sometimes he made a lot of money, and sometimes he lost a lot of money in obeying the Lord, and it didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was obedience. So he was a good man for the Lord to release funds to. But he felt that God spoke to him to come and see this world's richest man at the time. And so he stayed with us, and he drove up there each day for, I don't know, maybe a week, and tried to get in to see this man. And he got as far as the right-hand man, the doorkeeper. He was the bouncer and the assistant and the butler and everything for this very wealthy man in a castle-like property, magnificent, huge property, in one of the most expensive parts of England. And finally, he won the trust over a few hours of just waiting to see this richest man. Never did get into him, but developed a pretty good sense of trust with his right-hand man. And as he talked, then our friend would come back to us in the evening and say, "This man is so miserable. He's completely isolated. He doesn't trust anybody." And I think that even went to his right-hand man. I think he was very careful about him because he just trusted no one. He thought everybody was after his money. He didn't trust his family. He was completely alienated from his family. In fact, a very well-known crime occurred during that time where his grandson was kidnapped and held for ransom. And they never did find the kidnappers. But as they held his grandson, they threatened to kill him. And to show that after 2 or 3 letters back and forth, or 2 or 3 communications somehow, without them being discovered, they cut off his little finger and mailed it to this wealthy man, and it still didn't move him. He was more committed to keep the money than he was to prevent any further suffering with his grandson. At least that's the way it came across. So, serving mammon, when it becomes that all-consuming idol, and it does, then it destroys everything else. And that's not just for the richest people in the world. I spent a lot of time in West Africa and had an occasion where I spent a week of leadership training, and by about Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening of that week, I got to know the leaders well enough and established enough trust with them that they were telling me stories. And I think on the Thursday or so, they said, "Do you want to know what really makes us tick? We have a funny sort of parable that we tell, and that even has been made into a short television film, and it's right at the heart of our culture. And they said, you need to understand that in our culture, let's say in your culture, somebody is able to afford, your neighbor is able to afford a really nice new car. And he drives down the street. And in your culture, as we understand it, you will probably look at that and say, man, I would sure like one of those. And I need to work a little harder, and I need to be a little bit more diligent at my job, and I need to get some more money, and I need to buy that. Well, yeah, okay, that's kind of how it works. And he said, we don't do that. We look at that neighbor going down the street in this luxury car, and we think, I do not want him to have that car. I want that car. I don't want him to have it. So it's covetousness. That's why thou shalt not covet is the last of the commandments. It's really poisonous. So here's the story. The guy sees that kind of occasion take place, and he's stewing over the fact that his neighbor is better off than him, and he looks, and his neighbor's got a prettier wife, and he wants that, and he doesn't want his neighbor to have it. So he decides to go to the witch doctor, and he goes to his neighbor. And in a shame culture, if somebody just outright asks you for something, you can't ignore them, and you can't refuse them. So the neighbor says, okay, but it's a grudging gift of the chicken. He gets the chicken from his neighbor so he can go and offer a sacrifice with the witch doctor for the prosperity god, whatever it's called. And by the way, scripturally, the extent of prosperity gods and what they lead to is best characterized by Molech. I was looking it up, and I knew I'd read it recently. I'm still in the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, and I'm in Leviticus. But it's back in Leviticus, or back in Leviticus 18, where you first hear Molech. What was Molech? Molech was a prosperity god that seduced Israel and had them burning their firstborn sons in a funeral pyre. They just burned them alive. Their firstborn sons to Molech for the sake of prosperity. That just illustrates what prosperity gods are about. That's why money and the acquisition of wealth is so dangerously associated with idolatry, and the idolatry is so awfully associated with some of the worst human behavior. So the story goes on that he goes to the witch doctor, and amazingly, the god appears out of the fire, out of the funeral fire for the chicken, and says, "What do you want?" And the guy is frozen, and he says, could I come back in 2 weeks? Because he just couldn't think, what did he really want? So he went away. The prosperity god, the spirit, said, okay. So he came back, and the god appeared again and said, what do you want? And he said, I know that was not your chicken. So anything you ask for, your neighbor is going to get double because it was his chicken. This just threw the man into an awful quandary. He said, I can't ask for that new car because then my neighbor will get one twice as expensive. I can't ask for the most beautiful wife in the world because it won't be, because it'll be my neighbor's wife who's the more beautiful. Can't ask for it. And finally he said, I've got it. I want you to put out my right eye. Yuck. Because that meant his neighbor would have both eyes put out. Such is the power of covetousness. So that is such a strong statement, that I'm making here. I need a little more biblical backup to that. And you do see the Bible contrasting the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of God. But I think that there is a real key to that in Ezekiel 28. Now, a little bit of context. We were, I mentioned last time that we started these prayer meetings in London, and Graham, Kendrick, and I were doing concerts of prayer and half nights of prayer, and then we did the City March, and that grew into March for Jesus, where we walked around London, and we affirmed and we thanked God, and we worshipped for all the great things that had happened in the history of London. But we also stood against what the enemy had done at different locations, like the Temple of Mithras and various locations where there were occult practices in the history of the city of London. And my friend Pete Adams did research on that, published a small book on it. It was a great time. One of the things that happened during that is we were fasting and praying, and we got this sense that what the enemy had established at times over London and was trying to reestablish in a deeper way was the spirit of greed and unrighteous trade. And it was Ezekiel 28 that the Lord used to confirm that. Many different ways that passage came to us, and I wasn't really familiar with it before that time. But this is what Ezekiel 28 is about. It's about the city of Tyre, which was the capital of Phoenicia, which was the big trading capital for that time. It was a very, very wealthy city and a very, very powerful king, and it seemed like it was an unconquerable city and one of immeasurable wealth. And this is what Ezekiel prophesied over Tyre. So remember, you got Tyre and Jerusalem. Tyre was better placed to be the trading capital because it was on a peninsula out to sea. What are they called? The road goes out to the sea, and then it was kind of an island, but so effectively a peninsula, a causeway out, and a good port. And of course, Jerusalem was on the trade routes where the caravans, the camel caravans, would come by, but not where the ships would come. So Jerusalem was well off, and of course really thrived under Solomon, but not like Tyre, capital of Phoenicia. So that's the background. And Ezekiel prophesied, and he said this at the beginning. So this message came to me from the Lord. This is Ezekiel 28:1. Son of man, give the prince of Tyre this message for the sovereign Lord. From the sovereign Lord, who says, in your great pride you claim, I am a god. I sit on a divine throne in the heart of the sea. But you're only a man. You're not a god. Though you boast that you are a god, you regard yourself as wiser than Daniel. So this is post the exile. And think no secret is hidden from you. With your wisdom and your understanding, you have amassed great wealth, gold and silver for your treasuries, etc. And on it goes. It goes on for 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 verses. And the Lord is saying, no, I'm going to cast you into the sea. I'm going to give you over to the hands of foreigners. And then he goes on to say, the Lord then gave me this further message came to me. Son of man, sing this funeral song for the king of Tyre. So there was the prince of Tyre, and this is the king of Tyre. And it's quite easy to read those as just synonyms for the same person, but it's not. Because this is what he says about him. You were the model of perfection. So this is not a man. Full of wisdom and exquisite in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Your clothing was adorned with every precious stone, red carnelian, etc., going right down through all the stones, and set in the finest gold. They were given to you on the day you were created. So we know we've got a created being, but we've got a created being who was there from the beginning of time. In human terms, from the beginning of time. So who was he? Well, God says, I ordained you and anointed you as the mighty angelic guardian. You had access to the holy mountain of God. You walked among the stones of fire. You were blameless in all you did. So this is not a human. And this is not Adam or Eve. You know, C.S. Lewis got away with speculating about this because he wrote fiction. And in his space trilogy, he sort of imagined what it would be like if every planet had an angelic watcher over it, a principality over the whole planet. And that maybe that would be true in some parts of the universe. And that, well, what if we're the only one where the angelic being who was created with such incredible beauty and ability and intelligence and all the rest, what if that angelic being fell to earth because of pride only here? And so we have all the things that go on here because we have a principality over us. Now, I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying that's what C.S. Lewis seemed to speculate in the Space Trilogy, where you had Venus and Mars and Earth, and only on Earth was there this mess of wickedness. Is that possible? I don't know. Am I positing it as something that I believe? Nope. No, I just think it's quite interesting. And I like to think that way, but if it bothers you, put it aside. But what I think is that this passage of Scripture probably was something that fed into C.S. Lewis's imagination about this, because it says that you were blameless in all you did for the day you were created, until the day evil was found in you. Your rich commerce led you into violence, and you sinned. Whew, that's the way it still is today, isn't it? In a way, the most atrocious aspects of human history are when power-hungry men, sometimes women, but very rarely, when power-hungry men come into great wealth and get more power, and it's never enough, and they want more, and they want more, and they want more, and wealth, they know, is essential for gaining power. It's almost synonymous with power. That's why if you ever get some wealth where you have relatively more than you used to have, you get this feeling of power, of self-sufficiency. I can do this, Isn't it great to feel this freedom of having enough money to do this and do that and so on? I remember hearing a podcaster say, I don't think you're really rich until you go into a restaurant and the prices on the meals are of no consequence to you whatsoever. I thought, well, that's a pretty good way of saying it, because that gives you a feeling of power. You can do anything you want, at least when it comes to ordering your food. So, and is it ever enough? No, it's never enough. And so Mammon keeps saying, keep worshiping, sacrifice more, sacrifice your family, sacrifice your children, sacrifice your business relationships, lie, cheat, and steal until you have enough. But what is enough? It never comes. That's the nature of all idolatry. Whether you get captured by addictions to substances or alcohol or whatever, it's always saying more. It's never enough. If it's not saying more in bigger doses, it's at least saying more often, more regularly, longer periods. Stay on that high, and always asking for more, until, by the grace of God, and often because of praying people around you, sometime in your life the veil lifts, and you realize, wait a minute, this is not providing the life that I really seek. I thought this would give me a sense of identity, respect in the eyes of others, status, fulfillment. That people would like, even if they don't like me, they'd pretend they like me because of my money. And you realize, no, actually, I've had to sacrifice everything. It's almost like Molech all over again, wanting your most precious things in the pursuit of prosperity. Willing to sacrifice the sight of your right eye just to be a bit better than your neighbor. It's a powerful drive that is never satisfied. And so oftentimes, is it often? I don't know, but certainly in many cases, numerically, what percentage of the world, I don't know. But a person comes to a point where they think, this is not how I expected it to be. I've got these things that I've worked for. If you're in a free and materialistic society, you can think, well, I've got the new car, I've got the boat, I've got the big house, but I don't feel any better. In fact, I feel worse. And, I'm on my second or third family. It's not going well. I am so grateful that I grew up in a home where I had praying parents, especially my mother, as is so often the case, and she had many praying friends, and my friends had praying mothers who were my mother's friends, and I know I was very well aware that they were praying for me, and I was very grateful in the end when I gave my life to the Lord that they all came and said, I've been praying for you. And at the age of 21, I had what for many people is a midlife experience where I looked at it and I thought, I'm killing myself. I'll die an early death. And the idol I was serving, status and influence and wealth and things, appeared for what it was, which was a false god that couldn't deliver, but would eat up my life. And so that's when I gave my life to the Lord. So for me, because of that experience and getting Ezekiel 28 and that being, in a way, the revelation that God gave us that launched the March for Jesus movement, because we started with the City March, which was about 500 in the city church, and then we went to a bigger outdoor venue, and because we saw there was such a blessing on it, and it felt so energized by the Spirit. We felt we were praying exactly the right thing. It was happening at the time of the deregulation of the city, and that was the beginning of greed really running wild, being unchecked. It was a desire to make the city competitive, to be able to keep up with the growth of New York and Singapore and Hong Kong and other places that were already thriving as wealth capitals. And we were praying alongside it because we had in the Spirit this sense that this is not going to go well, and it hasn't. I'm not saying our prayers weren't of any value, but all I can say is that we had that right prophetic word, and prayers go on being answered. They can be stored up. But at any rate, it began with that. Then we went to the place called Smithfield, and it was outdoor, and it was raining hard all week, and it rained hard all day, and I thought nobody would come. And we had laid out the money and set up the gear for 5,000 people, and 13,000 people turned up. That was astonishing. And God was so in it, and that went on, and we thought, well, let's ask the Lord what to do. We moved over to Westminster, the governmental capital of the wider Greater London, just a boundary with the city, as I explained last time. And we expected about 30,000 because we could see God was in it. We had 55,000. It overflowed Parliament Square and across the bridges, and we walked up to Hyde Park, and we prayed, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and until in 1992 it had 12,000 people in over 150 nations walking through their cities, simply declaring two things. By just being together, they were declaring the unity of the body of Christ, and they were overcoming the kind of divisions that have dogged us, at least on a day, and getting to know people from other churches. But it also, their main message was, and Graham Kendrick wrote the music for it, as we worshipped and marched and sang, and it was all about, this is God's territory. The earth belongs to the Lord. The whole earth belongs to the Lord and will be full of His glory. Jesus lives here. And that was just such a wonderful experience. And it was in a sense, declaring to the principalities and powers, whether it was the king of Tyre, now moved to London, New York, or I don't know, but we were declaring, no, this is the domain where Jesus is Lord. And it's only a matter of time before He and His people will rule in the age to come. So that's why I say it's spiritual warfare. How we handle wealth and how we make decisions is an indicator of who we're really serving. And even in ministry, if you let money make the decision, if you say, I'd love to do that, but we can't, we don't have the money. That is bowing the knee to mammon. Don't react. I know it's not conscious, but I know how often the Lord has required us, to step out to do something when we don't have the money, but we commit ourselves and the money follows, so that we never get used to letting money make the decision. So it is an act of spiritual warfare. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Then all these things will be added to you. Don't look for methodologies and systems for raising money. Don't wish you had the right software. Don't try to cultivate rich friends to provide money for you. Don't do any of that stuff. Seek God. Obey him. Do what he says. And all these things will be added unto you. It won't be comfortable. But the Lord does want the righteous to prosper. But if we get used to serving money in the early stages of ministry, where we don't do things because we don't have the money and we don't ask the Lord what to do, we just try to raise money, then if the Lord does give us money, we end up being more entrenched in the idolatry of mammon. So these are some illustrations of, and just fleshing out a bit of what I mean by fundraising and spiritual warfare. Now, I've got more stories and more scriptural insight for at least one more session, probably two. So we'll see. But thanks for watching today. I just want to stick with this until I feel like the things that God has impressed on us, often through pain and struggles and repentance and making big mistakes, I just want to be sure that I pass these things on, because they are, to me, they are a precious part of just seeking first the kingdom, bearing good fruit. And I certainly can't claim to have done this perfectly, or not even that well, but I don't believe I've fallen prey to serving mammon. Thanks very much for watching.